Honestly, I don't know why something so weird and funky is so good. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance and I hope you are too. Today I'm here with one of my favorite videos to record, and that is new releases that are coming out that I'm super excited about. And of course in this video I'll be talking about new releases for November. And this was an odd one. I feel like the books that I decided to include in this video, they're not typical books that I would normally reach for. In fact, I thought, am I going to be able to do a video? Because as I'm reading through, I see a synopsis for one book and I'm like, no, okay, strange, but I'm not sure. And I kind of made a preliminary list. And I thought I'll come back to it in a couple of weeks and see if any of them grab me. And then the second time I read the synopsis, I'm like, yeah, that sounds actually really good. So to be fair, I'm not sure if that was desperation talking or if these are books that are things to be excited about. But I do promise you that these are all books that do sound very intriguing to me, very exciting. I think we're in a time of year that it's just not the season for the biggest and the best of the year, with a few exceptions, of course. But I do love making these videos. I do love seeking out books that you might be excited about if you hadn't heard from them already. And I just like talking about books. That's why we're here, right? And the other thing that is different about this list of books that I've come up with is just as an example, I have a memoir I want to talk to you about. There's a spy novel thrown in there. And there's one by an author that I did not have a good time with last time I read him. So, since I have your interest piqued, let's get into it. So the majority of these books come out on November 14th, but I am going to talk about them in the order of publication just for simplicity. And the first one I'm going to talk to you about is My Name is Barbra, the long-awaited for memoir of Barbra Streisand. Now, celebrity memoirs aren't something I gravitate towards. There are a couple of exceptions. And still, even though I might be intrigued by some of them, I don't rush out to read them. I just wonder sometimes just how accurate they are. But I feel like if it's somebody that you're really interested in, it would be interesting reading anyways. But Barbra Streisand to me is just, I mean, she's a living legend, right? She's been around for a long time. She's been in the business for 60 years. She's been the epitome of success in a range of things. I mean, she sings, she acts, she produces, she directs. I believe she's a handful of people who have gotten the elusive EGOT, won the Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. And I just remember her, the first time I ever saw her, I was a kid, and I saw her in a movie called What's Up, Doc, which was this nothing little comedy movie with Ryan O'Neal, I think. And I remember the first time I saw her on the screen, and I thought, that is the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life. And I thought she was hilarious. Now, mind you, I was probably in a single digit for age when I saw this movie. But nevertheless, I mean, I think she's absolutely a striking woman and just uber talented. And also, not really forthcoming about her private life. So I'm a little curious. Okay, so I just looked on Goodreads to see if there was anything else I wanted to say about this to you, and I just happened to notice for the first time that it's over 1,000 pages long. So while I'm being sincere that I am interested in this memoir, I'm not going to lie, it probably will be a while before I read it. That is a hunk of a book. But you know what? Come to think of it, if I were to guess about Barbra Streisand's personality, she probably said editor. I don't need no stinking editor. Yeah, I feel like if this was anybody else, the publisher would be like, you need to cut this down. Anyways, My Name is Barbra comes out November 1st, allegedly. And I only say allegedly because I've seen November 1st and November 7th in different places. But for now, November 1st. Now, this next one you won't be surprised to see on this list because it is a mystery thriller. However, it is a spy mystery thriller, and I don't read a whole lot of those. The book I'm talking about is The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen, and it looks like this is a first in a series. Now, I have not read Tess Gerritsen. Of course, I've heard about her, but I have watched the show that is based on her books, and that's Rizzolian Isles. She's not new to writing strong female characters. So this one follows Maggie, and she is a former spy who was forced to retire after a mission went terribly wrong. So she retreats to a very small, very quiet town in Maine, and she is just trying to pick up the pieces of her life and live the quiet life and hope that she doesn't get any more consequences from this mission gone wrong other than having to retire early. But then, as they do in mystery thrillers, a body turns up, and not only that, it turns up in Maggie's driveway. And her instinct tells her that this is a message from the enemies that she had while she was a spy. So she turns to her local circle of friends, all former CIA operatives, and they get together to try to figure out who's behind this murder. But she is getting some resistance from local law enforcement headed by the chief, Joe Thibodeau, who is also a strong woman, and she is used to dealing with rowdy tourists at the most. So she needs Maggie's help with solving this homicide on her turf, but Maggie and her friends are rather close-lipped, and that, of course, raises Joe's suspicion, and so that creates all kinds of conflict for both Maggie and Joe. So this one sounds like a fun one. Hopefully it won't be too far-fetched with a bunch of retired spies and CIA operatives. First in series are always exciting, and I just love a good story that is led by strong women. The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen comes out November 1st. So this next book is a little bit out of my comfort zone, but it did spark my interest because it does have to do with our current society, our current problems that we're dealing with, specifically climate change and where the future of the world lies. And the book I'm talking about is The Future by Naomi Alderman. Alderman also wrote The Power, which has been on my TBR forever. I don't know why I haven't read it yet. Apparently there's a show and all that, and I definitely want to read it. And I will. Now, the synopsis that I have read about The Future is somewhat vague, but from what I can glean, imagine a world where the CEOs of companies like Facebook and Amazon and Apple, they all had a plan that when the apocalypse comes or something like it, they have already, with their billions of dollars, set up a safe bunker for them to hide in until the dust clears. And what this book is going to explore is what if the people closest to those super powerful people come up with a plan for how civilization is going to survive if that happens. Still super vague, but that was the best I can kind of figure out from the synopsi? I'm not sure. I've read about this book. And while it might not be completely accurate, that's kind of the gist. And I think this book is going to explore our current state of affairs with climate change and the disparity in wealth. The internet, while in and of itself isn't as important as other things, it is a place that we get our information, and it's manipulated by algorithms. All of these things, and I think it explores how we as a society will survive when all of these things are kind of stripped away. So I find that a very interesting premise to a book. And I feel like this one in particular is going to kind of hold a mirror up to us and say, look, here's what's happening. It's real. We're past the point of making a difference now. Now we have to start thinking about what we're going to do when the shit hits the fan. A little bit dark. It's fiction. Don't worry. This super fun, whimsical book, The Future by Naomi Alderman, comes out November 7th. So perhaps you're hoping that this next book I'm going to talk about is something a little bit more uplifting, a little bit more hopeful. No, we're going to talk about one more book that is sci-fi dystopia. This one's called The Lost Cause by Cory Doctorow. I've never heard of this author, but I guess he's written a lot of science fiction. Yeah, I guess you can kind of tell by the title, The Lost Cause. Yeah, not exactly the most hopeful book you've ever heard of. But again, we're talking about bad things that are coming in the future. This particular book takes place about 30 years into the future, and we actually have kind of gotten a hold on handling the climate change problem and dealing with the problems that we're dealing with today. However, the new problems that the younger generation of today is dealing with 30 years from now are the people that are still the naysayers of climate change, that think it's all a scam. Think of like the flat earthers of today. They're the anti-climate change people of the future. But the way this book deals with it is that all the people who are working every day in some field or another of climate and weather and environment protection and all of that. I mean, if you want to live, you are doing something in that field in this future of 30 years from now. And all of the naysayers who think that you're the enemy are your grandfather, your great uncle, people who you are close to, but have this thing that divides you. So I think that's an interesting approach to a story when it comes to climate change and the environment and where we're heading. And it might provide answers to how we talk to people who today think that climate change and global warming is a myth. I find this cover extremely fascinating. And while this book has kind of a dark premise, I think it might have a hopeful ending. At least I'm hoping it'll have a hopeful ending. The Lost Cause by Cory Doctorow comes out November 14th. This next book will come as a surprise to you for being on this list because it is a Regency historical fiction / mystery. I don't read a ton of books that take place in the Regency era, but you add a little historical fiction, you add a little mystery, and I'm intrigued. The book I'm talking about is Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Lord by Celeste Connolly. This is another new author for me. And the first time I read the synopsis, I was like, I don't know. But then it does have kind of a feminist vibe to it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, I think I'd probably like that. So we're following Lady Petra. So she comes from Money. Right before she is about to be married to the love of her life, he dies. And Petra pretty much informs everybody in town that she will absolutely never remarry. So that kind of puts her as an outcast in town. But in Lady Petra's mind, she just now has the freedom to enjoy society and enjoy the elite parts of life without anything or anyone to encumber her. But then she hears that a long-lost friend of hers has died in the care of a physician that already had kind of a questionable reputation. So Lady Petra decides to use her resources to find out what happened to her friend. And in her digging, she discovers a private asylum where men pay to have their wives and daughters locked away. So this follows Lady Petra's struggle to try to bring this asylum to light, and she's starting to believe that her friend is not dead but being held prisoner. And then she starts to feel like her own life is in jeopardy with the people that she's trying to expose. So this one sounds like a fun one with a good feminist message in it. Again, it's not really one that I normally reach for, but sometimes those are the best books, aren't they? Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Lord by Celeste Connolly comes out November 14th. The next book on this list is the book I was talking to you about, of a book by an author that I did not enjoy the last time I read him. And I'm talking about Michael Cunningham, and I read Michael Cunningham's The Hours, and I did not enjoy that. It was many years ago, and it was an unpopular opinion in my book club, but I read the synopsis of his new book coming out, and I was intrigued. It's literary fiction, and the book I'm talking about is Day. This is a family drama saga that takes place on the same day over 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021. So it starts on April 5th, 2019, and you're following Dan and Isabel, and they kind of have a troubled marriage, but they have 2 children. They have Nathan, who is 10, who is just now starting to take steps towards independence, and then they have Violet, who is 5, who of course is clueless to the arguments that are plaguing her parents. Then there's also Robbie, who is Isabel's younger brother, and both Isabel and Dan have complicated relationships with Robbie. Robbie lives in the attic loft, and he's getting over a breakup with his most recent boyfriend. And something happens and Robbie has to move out. Turns out him moving out is going to create even more of a rift within this family. And things play out from there. Then it goes to April 5th, 2020. Of course, we are right at the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody's in lockdown. The house where the family lives is feeling, of course, like a prison. Dan and Isabel communicate through nasty jibes at each other. Violet is super paranoid and she has rules about opening windows and keeping everything locked. Nathan is rebelling and going against all of Violet's rules that she has to feel safe. And Robbie is trapped in Iceland for whatever reason. He's alone in a mountain cabin with nothing but his secret weird internet life to keep him company. And things play out from there. Then you go to April 5th, 2021. They've come out the other side of the worst of the pandemic, and they are left to kind of pick up the pieces of what has happened the past 2 years to their family, and the rest of the story is played out there. So I feel like this is going to be a very engrossing story for me. I like family dramas, especially sagas that take place over time, and how certain external influences play on how a family relates to each other. So this one has me super intrigued. Now, I can't remember why I disliked the hours so much. I'm really hoping it wasn't the writing style because then I'll be in trouble. But I am going to give this author another go simply because the story just sounds so intriguing to me. The good news is this is the shortest in length of all of these books that I'm talking about. It's only like 288 pages. So there's that. Day by Michael Cunningham comes out November 14th. And the final book I am going to talk to you about is the one that's the favorite on this list for me, and that is The Little Liar by Mitch Albom. Of course, Mitch Albom is the author of the beloved Tuesdays with Morrie. This is his first foray into historical fiction, and it takes place during the time of World War II. So the story follows Nico, an 11-year-old boy, and one day when his town is invaded by the Nazis, he is approached by a Nazi soldier who offers Nico a chance to save his family if, in return, he convinces all of his Jewish neighbors to get on a train that will lead them to a better life. Of course, unaware that this is just a cruel trick, Nico does this, and too late does he find out what happens to all of his neighbors. And when Nico does find this out, he decides never to tell the truth again. And so this story follows Nico throughout his life, but it's also following his brother Sebastian and his childhood friend Fanny, all three of whom survive the death camps of World War II. And Sebastian and Fanny are spending their adult lives looking for Nico. I think as time goes on in the story, you're starting to see consequences of what Nico said and did, and Sebastian and Fanny, and of course the Nazi soldier, and how they all interweave with each other. And I think that's going to be super fascinating. I think this story is going to be about revenge and survival and loyalty and honesty. And then, of course, I think it's also going to be about love. And the thing I think that really sealed the deal, I mean, of course, you had me at the beginning with historical fiction around World War II. But what really sold it for me was, like The Book Thief is narrated by death, The Little Liar is narrated by truth. And I think that's really going to add just that bit to make it even better. Out of all the books that I've talked with you about today, I think this one has the highest probability that I will actually get to it. I think it helps that I have read Mitch Albom before and I really enjoy his work, and it just ticks a lot of boxes for me. I'm super excited about this one. The Little Liar by Mitch Albom comes out November 14th. That is it. Those are the books that I am excited to come out in November. Do any of these spark your interest? What books are you excited about that are coming out in November? I would love to hear about it. Or you could just say hi down in the doodly-doo. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop, and a subscribe would be absolutely appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.